This is Me, I Am Mental, the podcast. A quick disclaimer. The content you find here is neither intended to be therapy or diagnosis. It is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only.
Welcome once again to Me, I'm Mental, the podcast, where we discuss all things mental health. My name is Charles Adede. In part one of this conversation, Onyango Otieno, popularly known as RixPoet, takes us back in time to the early years of his life. As a happy-go-lucky child, Rix grew up in a complex family environment where there was love and fun, but also pain and unimaginable cruelty at the hands of his father. An incident where his father falsely accuses him of stealing a book, then proceeds to beat him to a pulp before setting his hand on fire, marks the turning point in his relationship with himself and his family, turning him into a fearful, uncertain, and withdrawn child. Further on in his life, Rix faces multiple challenges in his personal development, including having trouble with his studies, being expelled from school on disciplinary grounds, and descending into full-blown major depression at age 16. As he grapples with these experiences, he begins to understand the nature of his trauma and slowly takes steps to address them. Now to part two of this riveting conversation. I want us to go back a bit and just your family. Where are you at with them now? It would be interesting to know whether things have improved. If they haven't, how are you managing? How did things turn out from the time you attempted to have a conversation with them?
Yeah. Well, as at now, I do not know where my dad is. He left my mother's house probably a month ago. There's speculation about where he's staying and all that. We don't know. It was again out of arguments, and for me, I have made it very clear to my mother that I will not want to be around where he is, where my dad is. I have done a lot of therapy on this as well, and one powerful thing that happened to me at the end of 2021 was my therapist telling me that I have done incredible work to try to let go of my father, and the missing part was I was still holding on to my mother. And that was exhibiting itself in my choice of partners. And it was the first time, because many times when the chaos was happening, I was the first person my mother would call. And she'd say all these things, and then the same thing would happen, and then she'd call me, and then I'd listen for 2 hours over the phone, and it's just the same thing, and I'd carry all that stuff. And I realized I needed to break away as well. My life was waiting for me to live it. My life has always been waiting for me to live it. And so I felt at that time like a huge load leave my body, quite literally. Because at some point I realized it was never upon me to save my mom. It was never upon me to save my dad. I could only save myself. And my body was waiting for me to come home to it all these years. I wanted to center joy and happiness as the base of my existence, bliss, and to make that be the soul of my being, not live in the calamities that I swam in when I was younger. I was very sad, extremely sad, and it's not somewhere I ever want to go to. So as of now, I mean, Mom and I talk once in a while. Things are not the way we would have wished they were as a family, but I have accepted, that I didn't grow up in a normal family. I accepted that a long time ago. I have accepted that I am not in control of how these traumas manifest in my parents' lives. I don't know what my mom will pick up as a coping mechanism tomorrow, and I don't have to worry about it. I can only support up to where my limits are. The rest, it's mine, My siblings and, we are pretty close, so we support each other. I was the worst hit of them all. My brother also grew his own ideas and culminations about how to handle the situation, but we are in alignment with how we are handling family things now. My sister is probably the one who still has to talk to dad, has to talk to mom more often, because they are supporting her in school and rent things, which we chip in once in a while. But I totally put up boundaries with my father. I don't pick up his calls. I don't talk to him. And at some point, I learned that in normal circumstances, if Charles is my friend and Charles keeps hurting me, and I tell Charles, this thing you said, this thing you did hurts me, and Charles continues to do this thing, the normal thing to do is to stay away from Charles.
Right. But somehow, if they're related to you.
And if they're related to me, my culture tells me, he's your father. You can't do anything about it. You still have to.
Yeah.
And that's my big fuck you to culture. Because I'm saying, I'm choosing. I have a choice. All children have choices. I have a choice. I can decide. I don't want this chaos. I really don't. And that's been me. And I feel happier.
So, but there's two things. It sounds like the chaos is from dad, but maybe mom is using you as a crutch, or
involuntarily.
Yeah. So it's not like she's chaotic. It's more like you've been just holding her, carrying her load for a long time.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm really fascinated because I'm going. I never had childhood trauma like that, but I have been carrying a lot from mom for a long time until just recently, where I finally went, okay. It's almost like I tagged my big brother and said, your turn.
Yeah.
Because I kind of need.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. My dad passed away, and I just assumed that my mother would sort of flourish because he was a little negative. He wasn't abusive, but maybe neglect, maybe in that way. And so I always assumed she would just flourish and just become her own woman. Yeah. Turns out, for the first time, I'm noticing that no, she was actually quite negative, and it wasn't just dad. But I always just joined her in blaming father, and I went, I can't do this phone call every other day now. I don't want to hear this. And I felt really guilty until you just spoke. like, guys, you may need to hear this. Like, you don't have to necessarily, because slowly by slowly I've been going, no, I don't need to feel guilty about this. I can be my own guy. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. And so I wonder how many of us I feel like I'm a man's man. Like I'm tactile, work with my hands. I do manly things, but I am sort of mama's boy another way. And there's a point where it's just like it's okay to not be that. Yeah, I can be my own dude. Still love my mom. I'm gonna call her once in a while, but maybe not let her just unload. Yeah,
definitely. And for me, I was very articulate with expressing that.
Oh, really?
I had to tell my mother I can no longer do this.
Okay, that's maybe where I went wrong. I don't think I did that. I think I just disappeared.
You didn't really go wrong, but it's just the way we carry out our boundaries differently. Okay. For me, because if I didn't tell my mother, she'd keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I stopped picking her calls, she would text, she would,
Right.
find other ways to communicate to me. But I had to stand for myself and say, I can no longer listen to another story about what dad has done, and I can no longer do that. I am okay hearing ways I can support you as your son in things you want to do, which I'm more than always happy to do. And I always remind her about those things. Of course, all of them feel triggered because I've been in the media a lot for the last 6 years talking about these issues.
Okay.
And it triggers everybody, like even as far as grandma. They don't want me to speak. They don't want, let's keep it in the family. But I keep going back and asking, like when I was 16, 17, and all these things were happening at home, why didn't you make it stop? Why did none of you ever make it stop? Now I have a voice, you want me to keep quiet.
Yeah.
Fam, I want to haunt you until you die. Yeah.
Question.
Well, I mean, so what do you mean by that, though?
Like I'll keep speaking. Like if they find it difficult that boy who we saw being abused and we didn't do anything about it, or we couldn't do anything about it, we shouldn't tell him what to do with his emotions.
But they're not. It sounds like they're taking it away as like you are actually haunting them. But what you mean is you're just keeping it out in the open. I mean, what do you wish they would respond with?
I don't think about them like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I'm just telling my story.
You're just
Yeah, and working with the people who want to move forward with their lives. It just so happens that I need to go back to tell accounts of history, and that's all. I don't have any grudges with them or anything.
Right.
The only issues I had was, somebody coming and telling me you're not supposed to be saying that on TV. You can't say this and you can't do that. And the same people who, when I went for support from them, they shunned me away. They told me this is normal. They told me even us, it happened to us, so just get on with it.
Right.
And I can't accept that. And it doesn't matter whether they understand or not. Like, honestly, like, it's okay. Yeah, like, I'm totally okay with that. But
You're a firstborn. See, I'm a
yeah,
last
of
born.
course.
So I'm
It's
just like,
different.
everyone has to get along. We have to like each other.
Oh, man.
Everything's got to be good,
The
right?
reality is different.
So
Yeah.
I have, you've gone through therapy.
Yeah.
It's brought you to a point of being a little comfortable in your skin and warts and all. It will never be perfect. You know your circumstances are not quote unquote normal. You have to live with it. Do you feel that you're more at peace, or are you still raging? Like, what I mean is, there is some of these things come with anger and pain, and you grieve what could have been, and what will never be.
Yeah.
And these people are still alive. Some of them are still carrying on in the exact same way that created the mess. So how are you managing those emotions? Because they're still, I'm sure there is anger and sometimes exasperation and all that. I just want to know.
I mean, I'd be lying to you if I told you, my coast is so clear. I have a white flag over there, and sometimes I want to fight people, man. I have nightmares sometimes. I see myself fighting with my father, and it is so deep that when I wake up from that sleep, it feels like the dream and the reality are the same.
Yeah.
Like, I wake up sweating, angry, crying, like it's actually happening again, So once in a while, those things happen. And thankfully, again, I'm surrounded by people who are very sensitive to these matters. They understand me, they love me, so I can text somebody in the middle of the night. Even if they read it in the morning, I've gotten it out. I can talk to people about it. I can write about it. I'm free to express, okay? But then I remember in one of the most powerful therapy sessions I ever had, the therapist said, I have to mourn the parents I never had. I have to mourn that. I have to mourn my dad. I have to mourn my mom. I have to mourn my community, the extended family that couldn't show up for me. I had to mourn, like the child in me had to process that loss so that I could accept growing from that point and not remaining stuck in the moment of always coming at those people for not doing this to me, not doing that for me, and all this and all that, you know, to understand, okay, it happened, it's a loss, all right? So there is a grief that I live with. It's here because in the beginning, first, like none of that stuff was supposed to happen. You know what I mean? So grief on that level of admitting that none of that stuff was supposed to happen. Because the funny thing is, I see it everywhere. If it's not with me, it's in the you know, like people are with in a matatu or somebody DMing me on Twitter or on TV.
But it's almost
in a
like
movie.
your family is right. They're like, it's normal.
It's exactly.
Not,
so
it's not normal,
don't make a
it's-
big deal of it
yeah.
and blah blah blah. So that grief knocks on my door so often, almost every day, and so I've had to make very conscious decisions to choose joy, you know, and my choosing joy does not erase my pain. It does not erase my grief. All right. It gives me the tools to deal with it when it comes. All right.
What are those tools exactly? Because I had this actually happened to me 2 nights ago where my siblings and I don't.
Sorry.
My siblings and I don't talk that much, but my sister, you know, was expressing some anxiety over a relationship with mom and dad, and I said I had to come to the place. I just quick sentence. I had to come to the place where it was okay for my parents not to be the people I wish they were, and she was like, "That's amazing. Can you help me get there?" I was like, I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know what that tool is.
Yeah. To be honest with you, it's more of a journey than a hammer, you know, that you nail something with and then it's gone. Yeah, it's more like a journey. And you see, there is something called neuroplasticity, and that's the ability of the brain to change. Yeah. The stories are the major tools. The stories we tell ourselves are the major tools. Like, because at the end of the day, you will feel according to the story that's going on in your head. That's all the time. If you feel in love with somebody, it's the story that's going on in your head. If you're still angry about it, it's the story that's going on, you know. And so I taught myself, and even through like therapies and being curious, having community with people who understand childhood trauma, that at my base, I am not inherently bad. At my base, like that is my base. Because in my home, every single mistake was punishable. So it can create, like, because your brain is developing, your identity actually could be rooted in the perception that you're nothing to do with. At your base, you exist, you down there, you know.
Yeah.
So I had to, and how I got there is by surrounding myself with people.
Sorry,
Yes.
just to interject, if I,
Yes,
I,
please.
I think I'm trying to get what you mean. So, for instance, you get to that point where the only way you can survive that hostile childhood where is by assuming that all this must be happening because I'm bad.
Yeah.
I deserve it.
Or
I
I
deserve
deserve
it.
it. That,
Yeah.
that is how you then...
Yeah,
you
because these were the words I kept being told
Mm.
as well. You're good for nothing.
Mm.
You won't amount to anything. You're always making mistakes. And actually, I remember, because I went to like 3 high schools, tumultuous teenage. And when I did my KCSE, Form 4, I wasn't so sure how my dad would react because in my KCPE class 8, I had done pretty well, but he had expected more. And he had this family meeting and he just bashed me. So 5 years later, my results come out. And I think I was either the first or the second group where your results will come in SMS, you know? So you got them, like they will come, like there's nowhere to run, okay? So I didn't know how my father would react. And he had a very specific knock on the door, like you knew that guy is here. And I remember I'm the one who went to open the door. And I opened the door and this man said, "Congratulations." And I didn't know how to process that. Really. Like, I expected him to jump on me and bash me and bash. He said, what? You're congratulating me? Oh my gosh. You know. And I remember 2 incidences when that happened. It's that time and on my 17th birthday, which was the last time he got me a gift. Actually, that's like half my life away now. That's like 17 years ago now. He came home with an African shirt, you know. I never expected my dad to buy gifts, or he wasn't that kind of a person.
Right.
And this guy just shows up home with an African shirt. Charles, I wore that shirt until it was tattered. Tattered.
Do you also associate it with God damn it, Dad, really this? This is the accomplishment. This is the first. It's so memorable that it's like, okay, me and a buddy also had the same thing, 10 years apart, where our dads walked in and complimented us because of some sort of financial success.
Yeah.
It was really?
Yeah.
There was nothing else in life except for this particular incident that made you happy? So it's of course it's memorable. It's awesome. Guy complimented me. He said he's proud.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's there's a lot of times you could have been proud, Dad.
Yeah. For me, it was, I yearned for his validation.
Yeah.
I yearned for his love.
I actually think that now that's what every child, and more so the boy child. You know, they say mother's love is guaranteed.
Yeah. They say, but it's not. But yeah.
In some ways, but now for the boy, they have to keep looking to their father to see. You know, do you love me?
Yeah.
Am I
Do you
there?
see me?
Do you see me? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I'm told, even if at age 90, if your dad was 120 something, you would still be looking to him for that. Could you see?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a need that is ingrained in us. It's part of our DNA. It's how we are, it's just who we are. And therefore, to have to live without it, or to have to find workarounds, how to cope without that need, is very, very destabilizing for any person, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I lament was actually lacking older male figures that I could trust around me. That was the biggest. Outside, not having my dad around, it was still, even in the community, still not having somebody I could come to like this and talk to about stuff that I'm going through. Even if my dad wasn't there, I still didn't have that. Because my uncles were still aloof. They were still trying to figure out who they were and stuff like that. And the good ones were so far away. So anytime they would come, they don't spend enough time. We don't have enough time to talk and everything, But the funny thing is, my maternal side of my uncles, they held so much space for me. Because sometimes if I'd run away from home, I'd go to them. And they just allowed me to talk. And I would ugly cry and say everything about that, and they would just let me be. And that's why to date, I honor them so much.
That's huge.
Yeah, they weren't about stopping me from crying or wanting to understand my father first. No, they just allowed me to process my emotions, something that I wasn't allowed to do at home. You know what I mean? And they are also quite gentle people, very calm people. And I figured I do better around calm men, because 95% of the men I'm close to, they're really calm people. Of course, you have 2-3 people who are chaotic, but they have allowed me to see their soft sides. I can't survive around chaotic men. I just can't. Yeah. So.
Can I ask you this is going to be out of left field, but it's a really creative question about the process of telling stories. You've said that quite a few times. We said like stories are like the key to like breaking open, people.
Yeah.
Fiction or nonfiction, or like in your life, is it the true stories of like autobiographical ones that make the impact, or do you work well with allegory and metaphor and that sort of thing to sort of parse stuff? And that's for you personally, and then for you, what do you think actually works in the broader?
Honestly, I think it's how you. I think that really depends on the skill of the storyteller.
Okay.
Whether you're working with the autobiographical context, it is really about your skill, because we were talking with him earlier about there are so many sub-stories out here, but they're not as impactful because they don't connect.
Sounds like complaining.
Yeah, and the awareness part is not there, right?
Okay.
So it's really about the skill. And then there's another person who could use fiction, they could use the allegories and the metaphors to go to the same place as this other person who's doing the autobiographical. So for me, most times I use the autobiographical part because I know it. Like I'm just repeating it in my head. And I have since grown in knowledge of the scientific part of the story. So it's easier to connect.
Okay, but I'm guessing you're talking mostly to peers. And I'm guessing that you're talking, or people who sort of fit in the same demographic as you. If you were to go really rural, if you were to go to places where it's not Nairobi, same thing?
Most times, because I remember, you see, like, for example, I tell stories in many places. And one skill that has always worked for me, if I'm being called to talk somewhere and I don't know what to say, I speak about myself. And 99% of the time, people see themselves. They do see themselves.
You're right.
Yeah. So it's the easiest thing for me because of how I communicate my emotions and the wordings and the pictures I'm painting in people's minds. Those images. People just sit and they follow. Even today, that's been happening.
Yeah, for sure. But now you said in your teenage years it was literature.
Yeah.
That was mostly fiction? That was
making
you think
the literature,
those ways?
The literature I got exposed to in the beginning was mostly fiction.
You weren't reading autobiographies of these
No.
So you're going through the news and you were seeing real people through like news media and newspaper and everything. But when it came time to feeding yourself, it was fiction.
Yeah, I needed actually to get out of that reality. You get what I mean? Because it gave me an incentive. It was an escape, and there was an incentive to, this is a different story, but it's also relatable.
Okay, so was it escape only, or did it also serve the purpose of teaching?
I think it also served the purpose of teaching. As somebody who really does appreciate literature in its totality, I really respect the part that fiction has in bringing stories closer to us about difficult conversations. You get what I mean? Because there are situations, there are contexts which, if a writer, for example, does not want to self-disclose, they can create characters, they create places, the movie world is full of that. You know what I mean?
Like, for instance, sci-fi dealing with complex
geopolitical
issues,
stuff.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Or, for instance, the book Brave New World, or 1984.
George Orwell.
Yes, a writer just thinks through something and then projects into the future and can literally test what that future would look like. But there is no realistic way of portraying whatever is going on in their head.
Yeah.
So they just have to create this entire...
Yeah. I think it's really beautiful. I think it's magical, in fact, because to create something that makes sense in a way that people could actually perceive it almost as real, like that is insane. That is magic, you see. For me, because this work is incredibly personal at the same time, every storyteller is different. You get what I mean? And what I tell people is just use your strengths. If you're better at creating the fictional stories to get at what you want to do, please go ahead. There's no right or wrong way, even for the purposes of teaching. If self-disclosure is the way, do it. If fiction is the way, do it.
It's just the quality.
Yeah. The funny thing is, as I grew older, I got more attracted to reading autobiographical stories.
Right.
More than the fiction now. So
That's also been sort of my journey.
Yeah.
I started off with a lot of fiction, and then lately I've been finding more autobiographical, and then also just I don't know what to call them, the non-fiction in the sense of things like Homo sapien, Homo deus, those exploratory sort of writings. Now, I just want to move on to something, or rather to ask another question, which is a bit of an aside. You said something about a therapist telling you, hey, you and your relationship with your mom is finding expression in your romantic relationships.
Yeah.
That's very, very fascinating, isn't it? Firstly, how has romance worked for you, especially given your background? Is it challenging to try and find meaningful love and be a loving partner, and be, when you're also sort of lagging all this baggage, and then what exactly did the therapist
mean? Yeah, I've had an incredible love life, actually. Very busy. Spanning back to 16 years old, I've been busy, and at this point of my life,
all right, wrap it up.
At this point of my life, I call it all a blessing, because, man, I've learned about myself in ways which probably no other spaces would have taught me. I've learned about people probably in contexts no other places would have taught me. Now, in those early years, I was very tight, and I was talking to a group of friends the other day, and I've written about this as well. I'm so grateful that I didn't rush to marry nor have children. I'm so grateful, because I would have been a very messy husband. I would have totally failed at that institution. There are patterns of me of being a very tight person.
I don't know what that means.
It means opening up was difficult.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. To be seen, yet it's something I wanted to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But doing that, like speaking up my needs, was hard, because I wasn't taught how to do that. To speak up your needs, like say what I didn't know how to do that. I ran on so many assumptions that somebody will understand me without me communicating. Right? Because you just assume, they love me, then they will get it. Boundaries or something else. Sometimes I got into relationships. You see, they were the same way. Every time my mother is calling, I'd just pick up because I'm afraid she could be in trouble. The boundaries are very blurred in many, many ways. And so sometimes I would be with people who were overwhelming me emotionally, but I couldn't say no. I couldn't say no. And so there was this quote-unquote savior complex that I had as well, what the therapist meant was I would date people who are in emotional crisis, because my mother was always in emotional crisis and I wanted to save my mother from my dad and I couldn't. And so I took that journey elsewhere, away from her where I had control. You get what I mean? But it also meant I was also in emotional crisis. If these were the people I was choosing, it meant I was also in emotional crisis and there was something in me that I hadn't really figured out. And so it was that attachment, which in some circles could be called a wound. And sometimes I also met people who were dealing with their own traumas and they just didn't have capacity to see me. And sometimes you are both interlocked in this mayhem, right? Of figuring it out, trying to make it work, but we are not aware really of the extent at which these traumas have eaten into us to the point that we can barely have healthy relationships. So for the much that I have dated, finding love it's not been hard for me.
How do they feel when you say my therapist told me to break up with you?
No, nobody, I've never had a therapist tell me that. It's never gotten there. But, things take their flow and relationships end anyway. But, this therapist was telling me that just as I was leaving a very chaotic relationship at the end of 2021, and that was the first time that I knew there was an attachment with my mother I had to think about, and my life also completely changed. So there are so many revelations and unravelings that continue to happen with me. Like I said, okay, let me take a break from dating. Let me also just take time to rest emotionally, because I've been in very highly emotionally charged relationships where there is chaos here, or something is happening here, something is happening in my home, and everything, there's no point at which people are resting. And so I said, let me take time for myself. And what I'm being intentional about this phase is I'm going back to 5 years old when my father would put me on top of a table and I would dance, and there was no expectation. You know what I mean? For me, it was just the joy. Yeah, it's just joy, And that's what I do. I just dance and post videos on Instagram and talk about sex, nice things, and I look good while at it, You know what I mean? And so I'm not dating seriously. I mean, I'm having fun here and there. I'm never ashamed to say. And
he has a sex playlist on Spotify.
Everybody needs a sex playlist.
Lyrics.
Anybody who's sexually active needs a sex playlist. Why should your life be boring when you're having fun?
I don't think the alternative is boring.
Oh, well, it could be, Darren.
It's not one of it. You don't have to be one thing.
Of course. I'm just saying there's more juice out there that you can try.
No, I'm saying thank you.
Of course.
It's a nice
but yes, for sure. Yeah, so, yeah.
So, in terms of would you consider there's a possibility at some point you may want to get married, have children, or is it a space which you're still, yes, do you ever consider having kids?
No, I don't want to have kids.
Okay, it's an
I processed that for 3 years, the last 3 years. I processed what that might look like for me. I think I would make a really incredible dad. The last major relationship I had, the one that ended 2021, my partner had a child, and we were very, very close with the kid. In fact, what I was not prepared for was losing two people, because they weren't my biological child. I don't have rights like their biological to call after we are separated with the mom. Oh, can I speak to so-and-so? I lost a friend and I dream about her sometimes. But after that, I just felt, no, I do not want to have kids. I think because of how my childhood was robbed from me and the parenting I have done for my parents and my siblings and sometimes my culture, my environment, I want to give space to the child whose childhood was robbed from him to enjoy the rest of his life without parental responsibilities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I might get married. It's not a thing I lose sleep over, because if you think about it, being raised in the Catholic Church, they have 7 sacraments, and marriage is among them as the ultimates of you to be complete. And I freed myself from that because it's not natural that everybody wants to be married. That's not natural. Nature by design is diverse. And so that means some people will want something, some people won't, right? And my value will never be centered on my marital status. Never. Doesn't matter what the Bible says, my culture says, my African spirituality says, it never. I choose my value. You get what I mean? And so if I find a partner who also wants to be child-free, and there are, these days, like the voices are coming up, there are so many other people who want to be child-free, and we feel compatible enough and we want to get married, cool. If it's a long-term partner who just wants to stay long-term for the rest of our lives, then cool. I mean, for me, the ring or no ring does not matter. What matters to me is that I'm as authentic as I am to myself, and I center joy as the soul of my living, and that I show up for my friends and for my loved ones and for my work, to the end of time. So we'll see how that goes. And maybe in 5 years' time, I'll be different. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. Just out of curiosity, as someone who also puts himself in front of other people, how many times have you said what you just said right now, like the last 2 minutes, the vamping on not getting married and not having kids? How many times have you vocalized it?
Quite a number.
Yeah.
Especially the last 8 months,
Yeah.
that's been more vocal.
Yeah.
So I've been talking about it. There are people. Actually, I am planning to go get a vasectomy, which is something I'm pretty sure that I want to do. And of course, my mother has been missing sleep over it because she can't understand why I don't want children, why I'm not married, and all that stuff. But I'm home with myself. For me, if anything was to be taken away from my life, I'm the most grateful for this awareness because I wouldn't be here. I wasn't supposed to be here. And if I was, because I'm turning 35 in a couple of months.
What do you mean you weren't supposed to be here?
Like, I have come across so many instances where I almost died, like, physically, but also the trauma would have really just eaten everything.
Yeah.
Really, like I couldn't relate with people. Probably I'd be in a very violent relationship somewhere and I'd be the aggressor, Like if I wasn't aware of all these things, like I have hurt people when I didn't know better. I have. There are people who look at me and they don't have very kind memories of me. I had to accept that's also a reality I have to live with. There are people who might never forgive me for what I did when I was 24 years old, when I was 26, that I said something or the way the relationships ended and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I've had to accept and process all that stuff and look at myself and say, so, Rix, what do you want to feel about yourself today? And I say that on the mirror every time I'm dressing. What do you want to feel about yourself today? What is there to process? And to be as light as I can, because I remember Toni Morrison, one of my best writers ever, said something akin to, if you want to fly high, you have to let go of the weight that's keeping you down. You have to let go. So, and if you look at the weight of feathers of birds, really light, and that's how they're able to be up there. And for me, one of the greatest gifts I think I've developed over the years is the ability to get out. For example, I mean, because there was so much chaos happening around me, I had to figure out a way to live life even in the chaos. Eventually, I sort of tried to make it work for me, in the sense that today, like, there's so many things that are going wrong in this world.
Yeah.
So
But
many.
what I like is that you describe it as getting away, but you didn't run away.
I'm not running.
Yeah.
I'm in the culture. I can see I'm engaging the culture, but I'm also showing the culture there's a different way to be.
Just allow me to add to that. I don't know whether we spoke about this a little earlier, where I was saying that there is many people now are aware of the breakdown of things falling apart in their lives and just generally around, and many of them are appalled and they want to step back, or just they're rebelling against what created this culture, because most of what created this madness is still in place. And so there is this sense that I see mostly the millennials and Gen Zs just not wanting to do anything with it. But in the process, this is what somebody once said about it, is what most people are doing now, which has not been done throughout history, is that they are not engaging with the issue. They are literally, yes, they're rebelling, but they're not doing anything more. The thing is, in the process of rebelling, you need to wrestle with it, because now it falls on you to fix it, to come up with a future that then will work for you. Because if you also abandon, the fight, I mean, the guys who maybe created the mess, they'll die off and they'll leave you with the mess which you're not fixing.
Yeah.
So what he was hoping that people would do is this: you face it.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that it's there. Acknowledge that it's a royal mess. But then take up the fight. Stay in the fight.
Yeah.
And hopefully you may just begin to find some way out of it. Or at a minimum, set things up for the next generation now to climb out of whatever funk we placed ourselves in.
Yeah.
So I thought that was, when you say you're aware, you're not of whatever it is, but you're still in it and you're wrestling with it. I think that would be something I would want a serious take home for everybody listening, hopefully.
Yeah. I think the inverted message about it as well is this fight, most of it is really about letting go. Because we've been carrying things. Most of that fight is really just about letting go. And acknowledging that there's somebody who came up with an idea about how a man ought to act, and I don't identify with that. How a black man ought to act, and I don't identify with that. How a heterosexual man ought to act, and I don't identify with that. How a husband, a boyfriend, all these prisms of existences, exactly. And I used to hold them all in my body, in my mind, that I want to be these things. You get what I mean? But then the more I started laying them down, letting them go, all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, all of this stuff has been a lie. It's been a lie. My culture has lied to me. My religion has also lied to me. My father lied to me. My education lied to me. All right? And so I have to, all of a sudden when you're left with nothing, then you're confronted with the emotional labor to create. So what are you going to create? Who are you going to create? And
you may find that in the process of building and creating, that some of the things our fathers told us were true.
Also,
some of the things that religion told us were true.
I agree.
It doesn't mean like an abandonment completely.
Yeah, for sure.
It just means building it on your own.
On your own terms, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, because all of it is connected. You're not completely disconnecting from everything. And maybe that's also somebody's truth somewhere. They want to disconnect with everything. But it takes a very keen, silent, wise mind to look into that which you want to disconnect with and ask yourself, is there something there that can benefit me, that I can build upon? You know, for example, I loved the Bible. Not the stories of war. Actually, I was more reading like the Ecclesiastes, you know, and the books that actually were not included in the Bible itself. You know, there's a gospel called the Gospel of Thomas. You guys need to go and look for it. It explains the lives of Jesus in a very different way that the Gospels, the four Gospels, don't give us. Today, I'm not a practicing Christian, but I enjoy gospel music. You know, I was sitting there on a Tuesday evening and I'm listening to Christina Shusho. There's a place that music takes you. I sang in the choir. You don't know that yet. You know, and I appreciate church music a lot because of how its spirituality. And you see, beyond the idea of God that it communicates, it also communicates the idea of human beings and our spiritual senses and fellowship and all those things. So yeah, you look at, oh, okay, I can no longer have this around me. I want to refine this to improve the quality of my life experience. Yeah.
Okay. This is really, really amazing. I want us to transition to a bit of what you have been doing in the mental health space. Mostly, it's the men mostly you've been focusing on, but I also believe that as you speak to men, whoever is listening, who is, you know, other people benefit generally.
Yeah.
But perhaps just now, also now be cognizant of the time. I just wanted to touch on that. Tell us what you have been doing, what you reckon your successes have been, your challenges. Those would be.
I think my biggest contribution, if I was to die today, especially for people I know closely and people who follow me on social media, I have helped so many people explain their childhoods through my stories. That's for me, it's like the biggest ever win, because I get so many people who tell me, oh, I'm parenting my son differently because of what you said you went through. You know, me and my partner now are having better sex because of a story you shared.
It's not the playlists.
Including the playlist. You gotta add value to people's lives like that. You know, I'm having people tell me that they have processed their childhood trauma better, given language to it, because for me it was the language that was lacking, because the language would give power to the awareness, you know. But apart from that, in 2019, when I really got to do the real work, was there's an organization called Green String Network. Green String Network. Green String Network.
String.
Yeah, they took me in and trained me on trauma-informed value systems, and we did healing circles for Kenya Police.
Nice.
Wow, yeah, which was life-changing for me as well. So we were working with DCI and GSU and regular police, and we'd go to Kiganjo, like the police college, and Embakasi and South Sea, where DCI school academy is, and we would have healing circles. So it was a program that had been flagged by the Inspector General at the time, and we had wanted to scale it to the whole police service.
Yeah.
And that time, it was my first time to be around police in that proximity. Very hard in the beginning, because when we were doing the workshops, the training workshops, like when we were being trained to be trainers, we were coupled with actual police officers, like psychologists as well, police psychologists, and their officers. And I mean, the fear was humongous. And so the familiarity came in time. And, you just get to realize, oh, there is something more than what I see as a civilian to who a police officer is. And it's very conflicting sometimes, because when I sit and I'm seeing all this brutality going on, I understand where it comes from. And at the same time, I'm bashing it, to understand these are systemic issues. It's not the people themselves, it's not individuals, they're systemic issues that manifest through the people who are handed over this power. And from there, I also created a mental health virtual support group.
Sorry, did the police program, how did it go?
So that was 2019, and then COVID came through in March 2020, and the workshop had to end. We were just about to get to the bigger ranks of the police service, and then COVID happened, and so that had to end, and then I also left the organization. So from then on, I began two support groups. One was a mental health support group where, again, storytelling was at the epicenter, and anybody who needed like some kind of psychosocial support, we would connect them to available psychologists and therapists. And then later, I opened a support group specifically for sexually abused boys and men. And this was at the backdrop of me coming out for the first time to say that I had been sexually abused when I was 20 years old. And, I realized that 10 years after the incident itself, because it wasn't your normal physically violent kind of rape or sexual assault. And again, backlash, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. And, some men coming to me individually in the DMs telling me, yo, this happened to me when I was 7, when I was 16, when I was 5. And I was like, oh, this is a whole other world that I didn't know about, which is also related to mental health. So I began a support group for the sexually abused boys and men, and that was 2020. So since then, every year I take 5 of them through 2 months of therapy. So I fundraise. Even right now, I'm fundraising for this year's cohort. I raise like 100,000 shillings, around $1,000, and I have therapists I work with across the world who love the initiative. So they take the 5 men through 8 weeks of therapy. I would say those amongst. There are many other small things in between that, my mind may not have documented.
Like I saw something about you talking to school. Was it Makini?
Yeah, so I went to Makini School, and my father taught at Makini School. So I went there by virtue of him being a teacher there. So being an alumni, many years later, they were looking for people who've had some achievements, and they could like come back to the school and talk to the kids and stuff like that. So I was more than happy to do that, because I also gained very many lifelong friends at Makini. And I went there to offer talks. I do that to high school students, university students. 2019, I won a mental health fellowship to Canada, and I visited like mental health clinics and this public libraries to connect with the artists and social justice activists there. And I spoke to in certain universities in Kingston, Canada. Again, about my work, about my ideas around masculinities and things I want to see differently in the world. And I'm currently writing a book, which I want to do a world tour with. The idea of the book is centered on like letters and poems to my father. But then in between there's sometimes I'm addressing my father directly. Sometimes I'm writing as though I am speaking like it's not first person, about other issues that I would have loved to speak with my father about, feminism, church, politics, the idea that, if I'm getting married to somebody, why are they taking my family name and theirs disappears? Those kind of things. Just questions that a 15-year-old will have in his mind, but he never had the language to ask, to talk to his father about, also because of the emotional distance that was there. So the idea is, to get that book up, and it's titled "I Will Start the Fire." I want more men to be curious about their realities, to be curious about who they can be outside the one thing they were taught they must be. I want them to start digging more deeper into asking themselves, really, if they were stripped of what they understand as masculinity, who remains? What remains at the base? There, when everything is gone, what remains, you see? I hope that in the next maybe decade, I'll be like a global voice in this space. And recently I did a TEDx talk around the power of intentional relationships, that is, especially moving on from COVID, where the cases of sexual and gender-based violence were really high, and domestic abuse, because people were at home with each other, and all of a sudden they're like, do I really like my wife? Do I really like my husband? And you start to really ask, why did I get married? You see. So just advocating for more intentionality, which has to come with the awareness, which has to come with the healing, and openness and vulnerability. So I am literally creating the world that I want to see.
Okay. Just when you, in terms of interventions, especially awareness, mental health awareness, you've dealt with people at different demographics,
Yes.
Age groups.
Yeah.
Where do you think the most impact would be felt? Who do you think is most receptive? For instance, you were at Makini, you've done the university circuit, you've done a TED talk, you speak to in spaces like this.
Police.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Police.
Yeah.
Who do you think really listens, and then where do you think if people intervene at that level, there would be more impact?
The 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds are very receptive, because they are living in that time when they're struggling. They're still under their parents' care, and their parents are not very emotionally receptive, so they're really feeling this message. It's kind of like the way we listened to songs when we were teenagers. There's a place they got, So exactly, that's the same effect my stories have on them, because they feel, hey, somebody understands what I'm going through there. But of course, the age around 25 to 34, where a lot of people are struggling in the job market, dating scene, with their marriages. Some of them have 2, 3 kids, 1 kid, or thinking of marriage. When they're a little curious about, something is happening to me in this relationship, and it's getting me triggered about my childhood and stuff like that. That's also a group that is very curious. For most parts, I've worked with people from 40 years and below. Above that, I'm not in spaces where I can find like older people. In 1 or 2 cases, when I'm going on TV and, we have an older practitioner, and, some of our ideas are clashing and some of them are meeting, that's when I meet some of them, maybe sometimes in the Ministry of Health conversations when we are being invited for this kind of things. But 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, those who we are calling Gen Zs, they're very curious. They want to know more. They are asking the questions. They are now even going for therapy earlier, more than us. And I know there are so many crazy things that are happening in this world, but in my little reality, I have so much hope. You know,
Okay.
yeah, the
It's nice
younger
to
ones
hear.
like want it different. And even though they haven't got it all together, I'm like, they have to be loved, they have to be supported if we are ever to imagine a different world.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
I'll just go back to, so there are some programs which people have sort of contemplated for maybe like teens
Yeah.
and such. Do you reckon there's a place where, or teens are generally, at that point, they are too caught up in trying to be teens to pay attention to mental health conversations? What is your
No,
take?
I think actually studies show that a lot of these mental health issues start manifesting at teenage, 15, 14 years old. And we have to appreciate that the teenager of 2023 is a very different teenager from a teenager of 1995, teenager of 2004, like myself. They are very, very different. Today, they have more access to information, even more complexities than a world before. And they have to be included in these conversations. We can not keep assuming that they're too caught up in, not paying attention. What's happening in their brain at that time is there's all these curiosities about what more they can experience out of life. So teenagers do the most outrageous things. So we like to bash them and say, you're being unruly, you're doing all these things. But perhaps we can create environments where they can know it's okay to experiment. It's okay that you want to do these things because you're actually normal by wanting to experiment, okay? But also giving them information that will empower them, telling them that, if you're curious about sex, this is what sex is. This is what can happen. These are the things. And there's also pleasure. There are all these things. You have the power to make these decisions, Of course, that also really depends on our relationships with these teens when they're still younger. It depends on all that. So it's an all-round thing. Today, it's getting more complex, and I will say that it's going to be more responsible to start having mental health conversations with kids as young as 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
It's going to be more responsible to do that in the long run. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Men, and this is now me wrapping up. Stigma. So, like we said, most of us don't even want to begin to imagine we might be facing mental health challenges. Because we have been socialized to always be strong.
Yeah.
Now, in which case, getting through to men about mental health is almost impossible sometimes.
Yeah.
But we do need to do this, and we do need to support each other as men.
Yeah.
In practical terms, where do we start?
Yeah.
So there is, in your case, you've created a forum where you tell your stories and you begin to sort of soften people up a bit to make people more receptive. But men's because a traditional setting where perhaps you could also find your peers and age groups with whom you could talk in certain ways are gone. Now we need to come up with something that gives us that space and provides the support. I don't know whether you have any ideas or thoughts around that.
Definitely. Anytime I'm asked that question, I ask the interviewer to start it.
Okay.
Yes. It has to be real with you. first. For me, without the male group at Bible study that began, I don't know what would have happened to me, really, you see. So this system didn't come from a vacuum. I tested it, There was somewhere it has been working, and, of course you can't be the same like everybody in a group, but that peer support group is incredibly powerful. There's a study that showed when boys are younger, their friendships are more intimate. They hold hands. That wrestling thing we used to do, holding like shoulders over each other and going. So the seed is there of loving each other. It's there, all right? But it's dried out by being beaten out of us, okay? When we are heading towards adolescence, And at that time, we start separating because we want both independence and at the same time to emulate the male figures around us because of all these body changes happening. And more often than not, we don't have enough healthy male figures around us to keep us grounded. We don't have that. So for me, the remedy is to go back. I talk to my lady friends and I tell them how I envy them for how they are really free around each other's bodies. Women are so free, for most parts, around each other's bodies. You'll see them hanging out in the clubs, they're just dancing upon each other and chilling naked. Me and my best friend Manu, sitting naked there and our penises are just out in the air. We'll be like a freak show. They're laughing. They know. Right? But how? Right? Exactly.
Even go to the gym.
Even in the,
come on.
Man, I remember going to high school for the first time and our bathrooms were like long halls, So everybody's coming with their bucket and you're seeing these Form 4's bodies and they're just outrageous, because you're a little thing.
You've got to see, there's a comedian in town named George Waweru.
Yeah.
And he's got a joke about this. I cannot spoil it, but it's about just two guys walking and their pinkies touch.
Yeah.
And then what happens from there.
Yeah, it's
the
chaos.
Funniest routine. You just check out George
Exactly.
Waweru, Chinese.
Yeah.
He calls himself.
Exactly. Yeah. So we are very separated from our bodies from such a young age. And for me, the answer is at the body level, our nervous systems. The answers are there, So, we are like, human beings, we are like electricity. Our nervous systems are like this, wiring systems we have inside us. If you're connecting to light, you light up. If you're connecting to darkness, you die down. And so we are there are two types of risks. Staying in that condition we are in currently is a risk. And challenging ourselves to get out of our comfort zones is also a risk. Both ways, it's a risk. We know the consequences of staying in this current risk. We know. Yeah. We know what's going on.
That's the age-old thing about getting out of bad relationships.
Yeah.
It's the unknown is scarier than
the chaos.
It's like
exactly. So for me, that's why we do need more voices and storytellers to show us, because culture without imagination is so difficult to change, right? And so what I'm attempting to do is to create, because the trauma takes away the imagination, even the ability to imagine. So that's why if I'm dancing today, some dude thinks, oh, this is something only women do. But I grew up watching Lingala all my life, and it was the men whining their waists. You know what I mean? Like, make it make sense. Why is it different today?
Wait, what did you say? Trauma does what to the imagination?
It kills our imagination. Yeah, our ability even to imagine.
How I would interpret what you've said is that instead of you living with a certain optimism, and a certain sense of safety, which is the foundation for creativity and exploration, you move back. You sort of constrain yourself because you become it's more survival now.
Yes.
That's what trauma does.
Yeah.
And survival is just on the basis of not getting your head knocked, which means you'll never explode.
Yeah. Actually, to explain it more scientifically, if I could, for the purpose of this conversation, take these three brain parts. You have the frontal cortex. Some people call it the thinking brain, which is what we use for creativity, problem solving. And then you have the emotional brain, which is where the hippocampus is and hypothalamus. That's where we process emotions and desires. And then you have the survival brain, the reptilian brain, which is like, the last one, which is now connecting to the rest of our bodies. So when we are overexposed to trauma, we are using this last part of our brain more. So it means it's using more energy that can't get here. Okay? And so because the brain is also a muscle, what you exercise more is what grows. So these parts grow some more. And you find that that's why people who are overly stressed or overly exposed to trauma cannot process emotions properly, and they can't think rationally for most parts. So imagining this part, imagination, that part is really, compromised, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we have to bring this to a close for today. I think if we don't do this, we'll be here till midnight.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely feel like I could just ask you a zillion questions. It's really nice. It's really, really pleasant. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. I really think that there's probably going to be several opportunities for us to interact on maybe other podcasts.
I feel like this is the least I've talked.
Yes, likewise, and I didn't feel the need to talk at all.
I had a lot of jokes, but I just let them go. I let them all go.
I'm so sorry.
Well, it's the trauma. I wasn't able to actually.
Okay, so yes, I think it would be a good time. No, before we do this, but you actually did that. You actually told us what we asked about your future plans, and I think you were very articulate around that. Yeah. So I think
well, give us all your social media stuff.
But
tell us about tell the listeners.
Where do we find you? If we need to interact
on Spotify, he's Onyango Otieno.
Yes,
and you just look up playlists.
And I have so many playlists. Also recite a short poem.
Not today, because I need to prepare for that.
He's not here to work.
Yeah, I need to.
You're supposed to be just like
no.
Us performance
That's
artists
what
don't
our mothers used to do because we are good dancers when
the relatives come over.
Dance for the... Oh, no, please.
Charles, stop it. Charles, this is completely inappropriate.
Charles is just being African, but anyway. Prepare me. Anyway, my website is onyangootieno.com. I have things that I do there, some articles as well and stuff like that. If you'd like to get in touch with me, the email is on the website as well. Twitter, it's at RixPoet, that is RixPoet. I love the mustard color, so you will see me on a mustard t-shirt with very nice beard. On Facebook, the name is Onyango Otieno. Same mustard. I always have mustard somewhere on my accounts. Yes. And then Instagram, that's where all the chaos is happening. Most times, the handle is still at RixPoet. That is RixPoet.
It's mustard color.
Yeah. I'm still struggling with TikTok, but, there's a few things there that can excite you. But
and
thank
all
you.
of those can be found through
Onyango Otieno. Yeah, you can just onyangootieno.com. You'll find everything else.
And the playlist.
I have, he said the Spotify account is Onyango Otieno.
But then again,
No worries, Darren.
I might have been in the wrong frame of mind.
I mean, I love collecting music, and again, music, I feel for me is very spiritual. I listen to music all the time, so if you're looking for playlists to, like deviate from a boring life, or you're tired of what you're listening to, please, we welcome you in my space. I share the playlist a lot on my socials.
Don't get them mixed up when you're working Sunday morning.
In church.
It definitely has.
Well,
thank you so much, Rix.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to have you, and it's a real pleasure to have everyone listening today. And we know that there is space for more voices in mental health, and for men to be outspoken and tell their stories is one of the great takeaways. And I'd remind anyone to go back and listen to everything and write down, either in the comments or whatever, what your takeaways were from some of the things that poet Rix has talked to us about. And it's a lot to think about, but it's also joyful. The fact that dudes can actually talk about this, and it's not like,
Absolutely.
it's not a bad thing, and it doesn't make us crazy.
Yeah.
And also the neuroplasticity, the idea that we can actually learn and change and grow, and that this doesn't have to be like something where we're going to a therapist because we're suicidal. Sometimes mental health can just simply be like going to the gym, or it's just like, I'm an okay guy, but I could always improve. I could always work these muscles. And so talking about it, talking about with your friends, reaching out, one of the greatest, I think the takeaway really was like, just start, just talk about it. Tell the story, tell your stories to your friends. It may make some awkward silences from time to time,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
suppose, but I think we all can do it. Anyway, it's meimental.me is the website, and you can find all of our social media links there. And you can also find out, hopefully we'll start to maybe cross-post some stuff with Rix as well.
Sure.
It's been a real pleasure, and thank you once again for listening to Me, I Am Mental, the podcast.
Thank you. See you next time.